a podcast about amazing people from an incredible state. Join Mike Broomhead for Amazing Arizonans, presented by Resolution Copper. Copper is essential to Arizona's economy and to America's future. Learn more at resolutioncopper.com.
Another episode of Amazing Arizonans, and I've been waiting for this conversation for such a long time. Joining me is Jody Jackson. Thank you for doing this.
No problem. My fellow Kane fan.
That's right. And it's funny to have that conversation with you to find out how many people that went to the University of Miami that are in the media in this town. There's a few of us.
There's Faye, Fredericks, there's Jason Barry. Those are the two that stand out immediately. Why am I blanking on another
from ABC
big one?
15.
Nick?
Yeah, Nick Soletti.
Nick Soletti. Yeah.
A lot of people.
Because you don't meet that many Floridians out here in general. You
were born.
I was born in Hollywood, Florida, which is between Miami and Fort Lauderdale for those that don't know. But yeah, it was a great little beach town. Now it's very crowded, like a lot of things that have changed.
Where did you go to high school?
So I went to St. Thomas Aquinas for 1 year, but then I went to Chaminade Madonna. Chaminade Madonna became, like it used to be boys and girls school separately, came together. And, it's funny, they're like a football power now, Chaminade Madonna.
Oh, yeah,
but
I know.
they were not back then. St. Thomas was and
still is.
Still kind of
I think
is,
they won the state championship this year. I still follow high school football in Florida. The alma mater of Michael Irvin.
That's right. St. Thomas had a lot of, and then the Blades brothers went to Fort Lauderdale High. And, there was so much talent down there. There still is, but now the talent has grown in like Texas, California, even Arizona, Nevada. But like back in the day, it was like Florida, Texas, California.
I was Pop Warner teammates with Deion Sanders. We were teammates.
Wow.
I got to watch Emmitt Smith play high school ball, Michael Irvin play high school ball. I coached against Edgar and James.
Okay. What town did you grow up in?
Fort Myers.
Okay.
On
Fort
the Gulf
Myers,
side.
Yeah.
Anyway, interesting to grow up in that same area, realizing, was it always a dream to be in sports for you?
It was. I always loved sports from day one, but actually, if I'm being honest, really just doing news or reporting was kind of my goal. I used to drive. I remember my mom and I would come home from school, and I would pretend to be these anchors on the ABC station down there, Channel 10, and it just evolved from there. And I didn't really know I could get into sports in the beginning, and when I was in college, I feel like a lot of the guys in my communications program, they were all trying to get the spots on the, when we were doing newscasts, it was mostly the guys doing it, and, play-by-play for sure. And then it just, when I got out of school, I was trying to get jobs in news, and I cold called the sports radio station. This is why radio roots are like my thing. I just love it. So WQAM down there, Andrew Ashwood at the time hired me and 3 other college grads that had just gotten out, and that was it. I fell in love with it. I fell in love with especially the immediacy of radio, and that was my big start, I guess you could say.
Were you an athlete in high school and college at all?
So I did play a little bit of everything. I played tennis, but I was a baton twirler my entire life, and I was a baton twirler at Miami as well.
So the love of sports, I think that for people that didn't grow up in that area, I've said to people here, and maybe you'll agree with me, the elite programs in high school, whatever sport it is, in Arizona, could compete anywhere in the nation. It's the depth that's different. And growing up where we did, Pop Warner football games were well attended, as silly as that sounds. High school football games, towns would shut down. Yeah. It's still such a big thing. So sports was always such a big part of our childhood, don't you think? And did that lead to part of your love for all of this? Oh, for sure. You'll understand this. But growing up, so on TV, they used to have the coaches shows on a Saturday morning, and it would go in what order, I don't remember, but like Galen Hall, who was the coach at Florida, Bobby Bowden at the coach at Florida State, and then Jimmy Johnson, or I guess actually at that point it was Howard Schnellenberger. And I was pretty young. I mean, I was like in 3rd, 4th grade maybe, or I don't know. And then I remember loving the Dolphins, and the Dolphins going to the Super Bowl in Dan Marino's first year. And I always loved it. I loved football. My parents used to watch the Braves, so I used to watch the Atlanta Braves on TBS. Right. So that's all we could get, back then. We, had, I guess, cable or whatever. I don't remember. No, it might have been over the air. I don't even remember. But yeah, and I just love watching sports. The iconic places, and it's so funny because this is such an Arizona-centric thing, and your story here is amazing, but starting in a place like the Orange Bowl, whether it was the University of Miami or going to watch the Dolphins play in that stadium, there is something about the nostalgia of a building like that, whether it's Wrigley Field in Chicago or it's Fenway Park or it's the Orange Bowl. That was just an iconic place. My very first NFL game, I didn't go to an NFL game till I was older. I was 18 years old, was when the Dolphins beat the Bears on Monday night for the only loss for the Bears that year. But being in that building.
What year was that?
86.
That was the 85. Yeah, the Super Bowl shuffle.
Yeah.
That was another one for NFL. That was kind of what caught my attention as a young sports fan. I think I paid attention to that, the popularity of the Bears.
Sure.
But the Orange Bowl was amazing. I mean, now when I go to the cover the Marlins, which actually, I usually get that trip every year being from down there, and I always walk in there and remember kind of those hallowed grounds of the Orange Bowl, and I really miss it. And it's unfortunate that now, they've played there for a long time now up in Broward at Hard Rock. I think there are things that I forget now that I haven't lived there in so long. I still call it Joe Robbie Stadium because that's what it was back in the day. But that was, my memories are incredible. So my memories, my mom, I really need to credit both my mom and dad, but my mom, so my dad was a mailman and he would work on Saturday, and my mom we'd go down. And, when you live in Hollywood or Hallandale, like going down there, it's only 40 minutes, but it's kind of a big trip. You're like going to Miami. And we would sit in the $8 general admission seats in the end zone. And, I credit my mom, I guess, for really fueling that fire for me. And even the Notre Dame game, you could get in for the $8 seats.
Yeah.
And back in, that was the 87 season. Yeah.
It's such a hot ticket. And the reason why I start there is because your beginnings, but the love of sports, when you're in wherever community you're in, if there's a love of something, everybody you seem to gravitate toward. I don't know about you, but there's nostalgia when I'm able to, I went to a game here and I remember thinking I'm going to a college football game because your heart starts beating because college football is such a big deal where we grew up. Yeah. I've loved sports my whole life and I've been so disconnected from it for so long, but I loved it so much when I was coaching. It's been 30 years since I've coached and I still follow high school football in my hometown and the hometown newspaper. That's how connected I still am to it. So
yeah, football's a huge deal down there. It's becoming that way here in Arizona too. So it's been now, this being kind of my home now, it's been I'll be here 25 years this summer. It's crazy to think about, but love it here. And now I root for this state to kind of put out those products, and they're doing it. They really are.
Well, yeah, look at Brock Purdy.
Yeah.
Doing pretty well.
Story.
Doing pretty well for himself. So what brought you to Arizona?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I was in Buffalo, New York after my stint in sports radio in South Florida, which was so much fun. And everyone, a lot of us media, we stand around a lot waiting to interview guys all day. And so the camera people down there and some of the other reporters said to me when I was in radio, like, didn't you say you wanted to do TV? What are you going to do? So I put together a tape with a lot of I say tape because it was actually tape. It was actually a tape.
That was tape then.
A tape. And they helped me put it together. I got a job in Buffalo, New York. So I'm there and I get a call, from an agent, Alan Sanders, and great guy. He says, the Fox Sports regionals are branching out. This was the dawn of regional sports networks, which is like we've seen all the turmoil now, or the rebranding, or whatever you want to call it. This was kind of in the beginning, because if you remember, the D-backs back then were, only showing X amount of games. Some were on Channel 3, some were on,
Yep.
And then Fox, so everything was blossoming in that world. And they got my reel, and I had an offer from Atlanta, so the Fox Sports South. I had Rocky Mountain in Denver, and then Phoenix. Well, Phoenix was intriguing to me. Now, I always joke that I went from the coldest place. I'm a Miamian in Buffalo. Yeah. That was kind of a struggle. And I needed to thaw out, so I came to the desert. But the reality was, too, going back to Miami, my Kane friends, some of my friends from college had lived out here. I had 2 friends that lived out here. I had a few other friends that lived out here. And I thought, this is intriguing to me. And it turned out to be perfect, because I feel like the year 2000, when I came out here, is like everything started really, this last 20 years has been incredible with the growth and all that. So I chose Phoenix. I said, I think I'd like to go to Arizona. And so that was it. I showed up here in May of 2000.
But the longevity in this industry for anyone is remarkable. Did you feel challenged at success being a woman that early in broadcasting? Were there challenges being a woman in sports broadcasting?
You know, it's funny because I've always, even from the days when I walked in at 21 years old covering stuff for radio, you kind of have that initial, like, everyone's kind of looking at you like, who's this person in here? I kind of have a blinders on approach. You know, I'm so focused on what I'm there to do. A lot of times I didn't feel, I think, as self-conscious as I think some other women in the business did, being kind of the only ones there. Even in Buffalo, it's funny because Tori Lavello and I will talk about that. He was in Buffalo as a minor leaguer, and I was like the first female sports reporter at that station.
Home of Ron Wolfley.
That's right. That's right. I think he was Orchard Park, where the Bills are. And so Buffalo is one of those places where there's just a lot of ties, right? So I don't, challenges. I think it's a challenge to blend in among a new group anyway.
Right.
So I was just working on that. I think in general, figuring out who was around me, new producers, everybody. And I think, even though the D-backs, so a lot of the stuff was centered around the D-backs because that was the property. The properties that we had back then were ASU, the Diamondbacks and the Coyotes. And I just think it's hard being new, when everybody has their ways and everything, even though the network was pretty new. So I just kept going. I think that's been kind of a theme in my career. People say, well, how did you get to be here this long and all of this? And I just kept going. And if things didn't go my way here or there, I just kept going.
Found a way to make it work.
Found a way to make it work. Yeah. And my job has changed a lot through the years, different versions of it, different duties. And,
Are you teaching still?
I am.
Do you enjoy teaching?
I do enjoy teaching broadcast voice and delivery at Cronkite. And I took that on and, they had asked me in 2017, can you teach sports reporting? And I realized with my baseball schedule that a full semester class was going to be tough. I didn't want to give just half my effort to that. And so 2019, I kind of I circled around and I thought, I would like to teach. I'm seeing young people changing, our businesses changing, and I want to be able to kind of put out there the seeds of like where I began in journalism and even, in sports journalism, how to, some of the things that are fundamental to our business. And so I wanted, even though I teach, it's not like I'm teaching ethics or, but even in my broadcast voice and delivery class, I go beyond that and teach a lot of different things. So yeah, it's a session A, B, which is a little shorter. It allows me to jump in October and go to December, and then it's January through March. So I enjoy being around young people.
What is it you like about it?
I like being able to share my experiences, being able to share, what I've learned and kind of like, I guess, life hacks or business, in the business. The stuff that kids don't really know, no one's really telling them, what about when you're that nervous in front of the camera the first time and your legs are shaking and you think you can't continue? Because that happened to me in my first live shot. My leg was shaking.
Did it really?
Yeah, I was out at University at Buffalo in their first D1 game for football. And I remember my leg just shaking underneath me, but luckily I don't think anyone could really tell. I have like that whopping 30-second intro, so now it seems like nothing, but back then you're like, oh my gosh, there's the lens, there's the camera, my introduction to all these people in Buffalo who have no idea who I am. And yeah, just sharing like, what, you'll get through that. And it's normal. It's normal to feel that way. So I enjoy that part of it. And I also like getting their feedback, I guess selfishly and I have, I have two teenagers myself, but just, I enjoy kind of seeing where they are in the world. Not only, again, I'm not teaching news. I'm not doing news necessarily, but seeing how they view the world.
Yeah, but there's also, I think the view of sports has changed. It's there's the debate now. I was listening to Bickley recently was talking with Dan Marley, and Marley was saying he doesn't really watch the NBA because it's different. It's a different game than when he played, and he misses the toughness, not physical toughness as much as mental toughness. And so the games of everything has changed. Not necessarily better or worse, but the 20 years you've been doing this, 25 years.
25 years, yeah.
So there's been a lot of changes.
Oh yeah, for sure. And it's everything. Social media is a big part of it because content changes. It used to be that you debuted a show and it was on linear TV, and everyone would sit down and watch it, and maybe you would TiVo it. Remember
yes,
TiVo? But for the most part, it was about live TV, and that's what's. And that, just to mention, why part of why I love what I do is that's still live games are still something that people have to see in the moment. So that's what's cool.
It's the one thing I don't like. I still can record shows and be able to watch them, and I still do, but not sports, because
you want to see that as it's happening.
And if I know the score, it ruins it for me. I mean, I may want to watch the game, but I want to share in that experience with people still.
That's right. And that's what most fans want. Sometimes even I, as being in the business, I'll go back and I'll look at certain plays, but I want to see it in the moment too, even if I'm off that day or I'm not working a game, but you need to see it in the moment. So
the Diamondbacks World Series, give me your take on it.
Well, I was just here one year, and what's funny is that summer I went out there and I covered the Buck Showalter Diamondbacks that year, but I wasn't out there like every day. I was covering so many other sports. I was covering everything in town. I mean, the Mercury, the Cardinals, ASU football, ASU basketball. And then that year, I remember going out to spring training. I would be out down there in Tucson, and Randy Johnson, Matt Williams, Gonzo, all these like really veteran guys, and I thought, this is interesting because the 97 Marlins, so I covered that group. Right. And I left for Buffalo right before they won the World Series, which, by the way, when you go to Buffalo, they had the AAA affiliate of the Indians.
I say they beat the Indians.
So everyone's like, I show up and I'm like, I'm a Marlins fan. And they're like, what? Yeah. Because it's Indians territory there with the minor league team. So, but that was a veteran group, but they were a little dysfunctional. You had a lot of personalities that I would say were a little more agitating to each other and to the media even. Bobby Bonilla, I was with the kid, there was a cameraman, it wasn't my cameraman, but he put a guy's camera in the trash one day, like a big trash bucket. We thought it was funny. The cameraman didn't think it was funny. So you had Sheffield, you had a lot of interesting people on that team. But this D-backs team, I remember walking into that clubhouse early on, even in spring, and thinking, wow, this is like, they have the same talent and they seem cohesive. They seem, Bob Brenly did a great job with that group, and it worked out.
They still seem like, many of them, they still get along really well. I was in the offices during spring training here this season, and I know Gonzo fairly well because of our Sanderson Ford connection. And then I went in to meet Mr. Kendrick. I'd never met him, but Derek Hall took me in. Derek and I know each other pretty well. And he introduced me to Randy Johnson. And I had been around Randy a number of times, but I had never really had a conversation. He was very friendly, but they all seem like it's more than just the camaraderie of winning a championship together. They seem to be friends.
They do. It's almost like brothers.
Yes.
Because I work with Mark Grace, almost
another
every
guy.
game.
I would love to. I've never met him, but I've
You've
heard
never met Gracie? We have to have that happen.
I've heard nothing but really nice things about what kind of a person
he is. A great person, the most caring person that you'll find, and he just and he loves talking about baseball. So we're so lucky to have him because I remember the COVID year after we were in the stadium and there were no fans, and we did these shows out of the stadium, and then even on the road, we were the only ones in the stadium. We used to do them from there, and he was there. I think that year he stepped up for us big time. He did something like 130 games.
Wow.
But as a player, too, he was that guy that would sit around. I know you've probably heard these stories. They would talk after the games. They were old school, right? They had these recliners, and Randy had his recliner, Gracie and a bunch of guys would sit around. And I feel like, yes, they do get along, but then there are moments where it's like that good-natured ribbing of one another. It almost makes you feel like, this is what it would be like. I don't have brothers, but what that would be like.
Right.
Like love each other and yet get on each other.
Oh,
and it's kind of fun. And that's when you know how close they are. And they think about what they did going in there in such a emotional situation in 2001. After 9/11 to beat the Yankees, and just it's truly a special group.
I've been very blessed with this podcast. I've had Gonzo talk about that World Series and being in New York. Mr. Colangelo's been in here and told his perspective on winning that World Series. What was it like covering something like that? Were you in New York?
No, and so I'm honored to even be on this podcast, right, with Gonzo and Jerry. But no, I wasn't. Todd Walsh was
there,
covering those games, and I was only at the home games.
But what was that like? Because Gonzo told me that they had made a pact as a team that if they won the World Series in New York, because they were up. I mean, they weren't being presumptuous. They were up, 3-0.
Yeah, they had won every game in that series was the home team won.
So they were up, and they had made a pact that if they won the World Series in New York, they wouldn't celebrate on the field out of respect for New York fans. To be in the biggest moment of your career and have that kind of forethought, that's the kind of respect they had for walking into that situation. I think that's remarkable.
I love that. Yeah, it does take a lot. It's they were not going to be selfish and do that. They were going to have respect for what that city had gone through. And it doesn't surprise me, though, because that's, Gonzo was a leader in there. There were a few other leaders as well, and that really speaks to who they are as people. And I think that's why we still love these guys today.
And I think it's the same thing for Mr. Colangelo. I think the respect that he has in every industry he's been involved in, that I think people are on their best behavior because of his expectation of that.
Yeah, true class. When you're around him, it's just that's the way he handles himself, and everything is. I think that it starts from the top, right? So that organization led by Jerry. And I think that's the way that they all did it, and I think that speaks to the basis of the D-backs and where they, how they were rooted and what kind of people were around in the beginning that brought, heck, I wouldn't even be here. I always say, thank you, Jerry. I wouldn't be here most likely. Yes, the Suns were here. Yes, the Cardinals were here. Right, the Suns came in 67,
late 60s,
and then the Cardinals in 88. But if this doesn't explode as a sports market, and especially look at my career now, how it has veered from everything to primarily D-backs, so very thankful.
Your moment, your Game 7 moment, your perspective on that, what was that like?
Well, it was crazy. I was down there in the kind of bowels, I guess, of the stadium there, what's known as the Sedona Club. So we were all waiting there because in order, you couldn't interview anyone until Fox got off the air. You couldn't be on the field interviewing people. It's just kind of the way the rights holder stuff works. And so we're watching this all unfold against Mariano Rivera, down in this, watching on frankly, a very small television,
right.
It's like nowadays you've got 80 inches everywhere, 85-inch televisions. And I couldn't believe what we were all just, oh my gosh, this is really happening.
And it couldn't be more perfect the movie script with Gonzo getting that hit.
And even that night, and I don't remember the timing exactly when the little bit of a sprinkle happened, the roof was open, there was a little sprinkle coming down. It just felt like a little like divine intervention or something like that. And Rivera, who had been nails, and then all of a sudden all these things happen, with the Grace at bat and then the error and everything that happened to get to that moment where Gonzo was in that position. And that's why, hearing it from him is always as you have on this podcast, because that's what it's all about in sports, right? When you're in a moment like that and you get placed in that moment due to all these other events that have happened and some of them very improbable, and then you come through.
Yeah.
It's so special.
Game 7 against the Yankees and the greatest closer, arguably, certainly at that time, in the game, and you get the game-winning hit to win the World Series. You dream it.
Yeah.
Every kid dreams it.
Yeah.
Jerry Colangelo told his perspective on it and how everything, have you heard him tell the story about everything being tunnel visioned? It's pretty amazing that he said he was...
I have read about it, but I didn't hear it.
He said it was all... He couldn't hear anything.
Okay.
Jay Bell was on third base, and he said it was slow motion until he hit home plate, and then everything just exploded. Yeah. And to imagine someone that brought the Suns here and what an iconic franchise he brought, then to bring Major League Baseball, and to fairly quickly have that kind of success and have the only world championship in the 4 major sports, pretty incredible.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and just going back to when it actually happened, eventually I did get to interview Gonzo that night, which was great. A highlight of my career, for sure. I'll never forget standing on the field, and then, of course, we were just taking pictures and stuff down there all night. And then when I finally left downtown and went back to the office, it was 2 a.m. and all the, honking of the horns and all that. So it is amazing to think about. Now, we know the sacrifices, right? The financial... they had to spend a lot of money to get those players. But without it, it's crazy to think about it because it galvanized the city. It put the D-backs on the map. I mean, everybody, I think in 98 when they came in, it was like, baseball in the desert makes perfect sense because there'd been a history here with ASU.
Sure.
Baseball was pretty popular out here. And then, and then the stadium with the pool and all that. But then to win it made the team, it put the team on the map. It put the organization in a serious baseball space. And so, it's amazing to think about, if I just go back to, I'm still just incredibly grateful that it's here, that baseball's here in the desert.
What's fascinating about that is for the other end of the spectrum is the disappointment with just the high caliber of talent that the Suns have had, and through a horrible breaks and other things to not win that championship yet for the Suns, but to have those years with Barkley and then losing to Jordan in the finals. But they've been through some real heartbreak in that organization where they legitimately had a shot and had things broken their way. Yeah. Should be world champions.
Yeah, you're right. Coming close in 93 when you have Barkley and you have that kind of a team, but you're up against, the greatest of all time. At least in my opinion.
Yeah, me too. Let's start that fight.
There's a few other candidates for that, but I look at recently because I covered the Suns from when I got here. There was some level of me out there covering the team, and then in 07 through 12 or 07 through 11, I was part of the broadcast. I was doing courtside reporting, and then I was doing a little bit of hosting, and that was so much fun. I mean, people don't really put me in that category of having covered the Suns, but under Mike D'Antoni, the Nash, Amari, Sean Marion, Joe Johnson, on and on. That was an incredible group, and it was so much fun to cover those games. And they would always kind of run into San Antonio, and it was that was rough. And then now, just in 21, to see them get to that point and not be able to turn the corner again, and then this season has just been so tough to watch. It's like, how do you have all of this talent? And it just shows you that there are certain characteristics of a team that, because Kevin Durant, he could score the ball.
Yeah.
He's one of the best ever.
Yeah.
And Devin Booker's a really good player. And, but you need other elements. You need toughness. You need defense. You need chemistry. And then for whatever reason, it just doesn't seem like they have had cohesiveness with their coach the last few, whether it was Frank Vogel, Monty Williams, that went south. Then you had Frank Vogel, Mike Budenholzer. So, I think it leaves everyone in the valley. I hate to play this game, but we've all heard it before. What would have happened if they had kept the twins and not gone with Kevin Durant, who seemed like it was so exciting. I remember that night.
It seemed like such 11, a no-brainer.
11 p.m. that night, my son, who was who was like I don't know what year it is, but whatever year in high school he was, and he's like screaming, and I said, "What happened? The Suns got Kevin Durant," and everyone in our house was excited.
But it also shows the fine line between the world champion and a team that doesn't make the playoffs, that it's so close. You've got all this talent that had their, whatever it is in that chemistry, puts you at the upper echelon. And there isn't a significant change that necessarily has to happen, right? In professional sports?
No, well, the example I think of is the 23 D-backs, because they had 84 wins.
Yeah.
No one even was really sure. That was supposed to be the next year of building.
Yeah.
You had 74 wins, and you had Corbin Carroll now. Okay, what's he going to do? And everything, there were so many pleasant surprises, and then you get in. But that's the conversation I've had with many people inside the organization is, well, we got in, and then all of a sudden, look what happened.
Yeah.
And they got hot. They ran the Dodgers right out.
They handled the Dodgers. They worked the Dodgers. I'm not saying that to mock fans. I'm just saying they did.
And everyone thinks that it was just Clayton Kershaw, to use a term that the kids use, because I have so much respect for Clayton Kershaw. So not my words, but, the kids will say he's washed or whatever they say, like he's older now. And he was not good out there. And then you had Lance Lynn, who also, they had the 4 homers, remember, in the one inning. Yeah. But it wasn't just that. Mookie Betts Freddie Freeman, those guys were not hitting. Those guys were not. And so now when you see what they did a year later and you see Freddie out there playing hurt and all the things that he did for them to win a world championship, the Diamondbacks were handling them from a pitching standpoint.
Right.
So it wasn't just Dodger pitching was bad, and then what they did in Philly, that was incredible. Yeah. To go in there and win games 6 and 7 in that hostile environment, it's almost like they didn't even know, like a kid like Brandon Pfaadt.
And hostile is an understatement for Phil. There are a couple of cities, Boston, Philadelphia, where you opposing teams are hostile is an understatement.
Well, yeah. What is the Eagles? They boo Santa Claus, throw stuff at him.
Yes.
So I know because my family's rooted. Before my parents moved to Florida, they were from South Philly, South Jersey, and my relatives are wonderful people. They're really nice people. Okay, but there are a lot of people with an edge. They love their sports. And they hate anyone coming in, and the rivalries are real, right? If you're an Eagles fan, you hate the Cowboys, you hate the Giants, you hate everyone in that division. And same for
Patricia
with the Phillies.
she is a Cowboys fan, so she understands the hate with the Eagles.
Yeah, and the Cowboys, when they were dominant, the Eagles had good teams and they couldn't get past them. So and that was just, I had actually, going back to my class, I had a student from Philly, Grace. She's doing great up there. She actually does some stuff in Philly now with social media, but it was October, my class started right after the NLCS, and she was pretty much in a sour mood for a lot of it, especially when I would talk about the D-backs. But the whole, but that's passion. That's passionate sports fans. And for the D-backs to be able to go in there and, that experience, it would have served them well last year. They didn't. And then last year was the other example. They didn't make it in. They had a good year.
High expectations.
So you're right. The leap, it's all about getting in. The leap to surprising somebody and getting in, I mean, it's not easy. I mean, you look at the Suns last year, I think that's what we were hoping is like, okay, they're not who we thought they were, but they could go in and do damage, and they didn't. They flamed out, so.
My world is different because there's not much fun about it. You know what I mean? There isn't.
But you have fun doing it.
I do. I love what I do, but people think your world is nothing but just fun, but there's a business to this. Your knowledge, your recollection of years and games and players, that's all. I have that necessary part in my business, but it's a business. It's government, it's news. But for you, everybody sees it as entertainment and fun. But for you, you have to balance how much you love sports, but you have to be on your game and deliver it in the same knowledgeable way. How do you balance that? How do you balance watching something and being a fan and then doing the business side of it of now I've got to report this to people and I've got to be the voice?
I think, well, first of all, I've been doing it so long now that it kind of comes more naturally to me. When I see young students come in and it's like they're very much like that fan is right here and then the business is here. Where now I'm like, I understand that the people listening to me are going to want an unbiased recollection of what just happened, right? If I'm just, and so it's like, I'm telling it like it is. I don't, but I also have personal relationships with when you cover teams for many years, you can't help but root for them. But I just feel like it's easier now for me to do that. And it was easy even in the beginning. I feel like there's like a duty I'm always about who's listening to me, right?
But you go deeper. It's like, I can see it. I just watched the same game you did.
Yeah.
But when you go on the air, you bring something that I didn't know. You know what I mean?
Well, that's what I'm trying to do.
But that's what I'm saying. That's the business side of it for you. Your knowledge and depth of knowledge of this stuff, that's what makes your job so entertaining to someone like me.
I think thank you, because that's what we're trying to do. We're all on our broadcasts, like Todd Walsh, Mark Grace, Brandon Webb, and Brandon and Mark derive it from their experiences too. Like, we're not asking them to dig into the numbers necessarily, but they will do that too. It's about perspective. It's about, because I was that fan that finds that stat really interesting, right? When I was a kid and you're hearing like, or even as a young person before I was in the business, like, wow, that's a crazy stat. Like, so it's not all about that stuff, but it is, you want to make sure, like when I go into a broadcast, I want to make sure I'm not missing something that people are going to be like, wow, you want to cover all your bases. You want to make sure that, and then as I've grown older and have a different perspective, and then you add that human side to it too, I think it gives you even a better, older and wiser is a real thing. I think that I just have a better perspective on what people are going through. There's a human side to the players too.
Sure.
And no one, like, I think that young fans, they think it's all about, oh, he's a bum, or he's this,
right.
or he's that, or this guy's unbelievable. Well, everybody, especially in baseball, you can go 9 for 16 with 4 homers one week, and you can be 0 for 20 with no extra base hits the next week.
Right.
So it's all about, and people always like kind of, I feel like.
Well, look at the Eagles last season. We go back to them.
Yeah.
You know, they wanted the head coach, they wanted Sirianni fired at the beginning of the season.
There's a lot of overreaction,
Sure.
you know. I mean, Eugenio Suarez with the Diamondbacks, he was really bad the first few months. I felt horrible for him. I remember going up to Seattle, where he was beloved, because that's where he was the last few years, and he was just kind of down in the dumps. Corbin Carroll, who's from Seattle, again, I kind of remember that trip because should have been a fun trip for these guys, and I'm sure it was in some ways, but they were both struggling so much that it was hard for them. I think it was really difficult, and then they both, you know, Suarez got red hot. Corbin found himself. You know, it's never over. You know, and that's what baseball people really do understand.
Yeah.
You know, and then that's why coaches like Torey Lovello and Mike Hazen, the GM. I mean, you have to evaluate talent and not just have that knee-jerk reaction of, oh man, this guy is never going to get out of the slump. So yeah, I mean, it's always fluid. And then eventually, I mean, you have to have an eye for like when someone really is, you know, either at the end of their career or can't fix it, then what do you do? But luckily that didn't happen last year.
Have you ever had a fan moment when you weren't supposed to?
Oh, that's a good question.
I was in the press box for the very first time. Now, I wasn't covering it, but I had a press pass for a Yotes game, and I'm a converted hockey fan. I grew up like you did, but I
had to learn it all in Florida.
And I fell in love with hockey. So much so that I bought the gear and was going to learn to skate. I love the game. And so I was up in the press box, no cheering, whatever. And I'm sitting up there on press row. Coyotes score a goal, and I jump out of my chair. And Gambo got so mad at me.
Really?
It was before I knew Gambo. He gave me the dirtiest look. And I'm like, all right, sorry, guys. I just lost myself in that moment. And I thought then, I don't know how any of you do it.
Yeah.
I would never want to be that unbiased or have to be.
Yeah. Well,
have you ever had a moment?
My moment I think is excusable in my mind. First of all, it wasn't in the press box, but it was after. So it was in Tampa covering the Cardinals in the Super Bowl. And, you know, I was there for Fox, but then I also did halftime duties from the press box for Cardinals radio. And as that game evolved, we all know what happened with Larry scored. So we were down there. We were kind of getting ready to be down there. And you think you're going to, at that moment, 2:37 left, 2 minutes, 37 seconds, you think they've won the Super Bowl. And I wasn't the only one. There was a lot of hugging, a lot of like screaming among the media down there. I remember, I don't remember exactly, you know, their reactions, but, you know, Kent Summers, Darren Urban. I mean, I just remember being so excited, and I felt like it was all right. It's the Super Bowl.
Yeah, it's all right. Yeah.
But, you know, what was heartbreaking was after they ended up losing, you don't even go out on the field. You don't even go out there. You just, I couldn't get over that in my mind. Like the players just came in, and we interviewed them in like little pockets down there in the tunnel. And it just, it still makes me so sad to think about that.
That wasn't a catch.
That's what I say.
That wasn't a catch.
I don't know. You know what? This goes back to me being, you know, Santonio Holmes got the toes in there. Yep. I mean, I will say it probably was, but it still hurts.
Yeah. And see, there's the difference. As a fan.
Yeah.
I can say what I just said anytime I want to.
Yeah.
As an unbiased journalist, you got to keep any kind of personal feeling, and that would be impossible for me as much as I love sports. When you look at your career, is there any part of it that's nostalgic yet? Are you just looking forward? Because you really are. You're iconic in this town. People you have to recognize you everywhere you go. I
mean, sports fans do, you know, but it's like anything, you know, not everybody's a sports fan, but that's cool. No, I have as the years have gone on, and I'm also doing more things now, kind of not just appearances and things like I'm sure you do as well, after, you know, having the career that you do here. I think branching out a little bit into different things has helped with that. But it's not necessarily about the notoriety. It's just the cool thing that I get to do this still after all these years, and I still love it just as much. Like, I don't take it for granted. But we just had opening day. Every time a season starts, I think, and it's funny because Torey Lovello said something, then I thought, oh, he thinks the same way I do. Someone had asked him about his first year, which is now like 9 years ago, whatever it was. Yeah. It was 2017, or 8 years ago, and I thought, wow, that's what I think too. You go back to that first time, or you go back to last year, or you go back to 10 years ago this happened. And it tells me that the nostalgia is kind of ongoing, because you have so many great memories and you have so many things that pop into your head, like remember this or that, or.
But you think, as an observer, you have not just outlasted people. You have a thriving career that the fans love you, but they're fickle. But the industry does, that you're well respected in the industry. And I think that is, in my opinion, the biggest thing is that you have a great reputation in the industry still. Does that make sense?
It does. And again, I'm grateful for that. But I think, because a lot of people will ask me, the students a lot of times ask me, those that have grown up watching me. And I think, and I'm always like, there are people now that are like in their 20s. They're like, I was watching you.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's great. I'm embracing that. But, I think, and I tell them, I've always worked hard. And part of it is loving it, right? I mean, in the beginning, I think part of outlasting people is, you clearly are there to do, like, I love sports and I love covering games. I love covering sports. In the beginning, I wasn't covering games. The other thing is the first chance I had to do a pregame show was actually with the Cardinals, right? I got my chance there. But then when I started doing Diamond, that was like 4 preseason games, right? That was all that was. But then doing Diamondbacks, it gave me a chance to be in everyone's living room. I know now everyone's watching on wherever they are, which is great. But to be in someone's living room every day, I joke with Gracie sometimes, like, we're like, reminds me of the old, like, Kelly and, it's still on, the show is still on. But it's like almost like a talk show. Yeah. Right? You're on every day and, or almost every day, and people get to see you every day, and you get to tell them how you feel and what you see. And it's really a privilege. I never take that for granted. But, working hard, being out there, and and that's the other thing is I say yes to a lot of stuff even now, and people say to me, why are you overscheduled? Why are you? Well, I always enjoy it. There's always, so we have that in common. I
say to people, I always say yes when I can. Yeah. Because someday they're going to stop asking.
Well, that too. But I think that when I get asked to do things, they're asking something of me, and yet I always come away with something that I've learned, or I've enjoyed it, or I've met someone new. And I think that's part of why I've been here so long. You know? I don't know. I think it's just people see that, and they see that I enjoy it, and they give me more opportunities.
I got asked to be at an event last week, and it was for Vietnam veterans. And of course I said yes. It's just because it's the right thing to do. Yeah. I moderated a panel, and all three were remarkable. But one of the panelists is 96 years old. He's a Korean War pilot, a Vietnam War pilot, shot down over Vietnam, spent 5 years in a POW camp, and was cellmates with John McCain.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
I walked away from that. I'm having goosebumps talking about it. Yeah. You're right. You say yes to things because it's the right thing to do, but you walk away feeling like, I got more out of that than I gave.
I feel that way a lot as well, and that's an amazing experience. Even it's funny because one of the other beauties of this job is, I got to hang out with John McCain in his office. Me too. When we were in D.C., a bunch of us with the broadcast group and the team, And
he was such a sports fan.
Oh, he was incredible. And then I got to ride. I remember, this is one of my great memories, honestly, in my whole career. I rode in the train through the Capitol there, and we sat. Like, I wasn't like stalking him and like, I want to sit next to you. We were just talking, and we sat down in the train and we rode, and we were talking about the Coyotes because he really wanted to help the Coyotes. And it just, he was such such a great sports fan,
Yeah.
and such a great man, and I'll never forget that. But yeah, you know what? Regardless of whatever it is, and there are things that you come away and you say, well, I hope that was what they were looking for. But I just think it's important because this community's given me a lot.
Right.
People have watched, people have, and now I get the chance to be on the radio here at times, and I love that. I don't take that for granted, and I love Arizona, and I love the people here. I love being a resource for people for the sports teams, and I guess it never gets old for me. I enjoy it.
I love that attitude. I feel exactly like you do, but I love hearing you say that because there's a thought process with some people that you work your way up to a position, and then once you're in that position, you don't have to do these other things anymore. And I never want to feel that way, but I'm glad to hear from you say that you want to do those things. I want to ask you just a couple of more questions. I was very privileged to be friends with Al McCoy, and we were privileged to have him on the podcast, and I still think that we were the last interview we did with him before he passed.
Wow.
What's it like to be in the same industry and to work with, I'm sure you've worked with him on some level. What was it like to work with people? What is it like to work with people like that?
Well, I mean, Al, I did get to work with him during those years I was covering the Suns. Yeah. And I just would remember, I would kind of join that group and I'd be down there on the floor before the game. And he's just the nicest man. Like you used the word iconic earlier. Like to me, that's iconic, right? It's Al McCoy. But yet such a regular, down-to-earth, classy, gracious, how you doing? Like kind. Honestly, kind and caring about everybody around him. And I love that. Like how, he had a game to call and yet he was always just, and then hearing the stories afterward, how I loved hearing from a lot of the people that spent all those years on the road with him in the broadcast group and hearing more of that, just that, what a great man he was. And so, yeah, I mean, it's just a blessing that, again, you talk about this community and like having a guy like Al McCoy be the soundtrack for our young Suns fans, our older Suns, whoever, Suns fans of all ages, to have Al McCoy on the mic for as long as he was really special.
I got to do two things very early in my radio career when the All-Star game was here, the baseball All-Star game was here. Sanderson Ford, one of the big sponsors of the D-backs, and a lot of us that endorse Sanderson Ford, they did a commercial called the Sanderson All-Stars for the baseball game. Tim and Willie on first and second base. Gambo was the shortstop. I was the third baseman. Rosie Romero was the catcher. And Al McCoy was the pitcher. And his line was, who else would be the pitch man? But we got to spend the day with Al.
Nice.
And it was so interesting you walk in, I don't know about you, but I walk in there the first time and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I don't even belong in the same area with this guy. The nicest, kindest guy. And then the year the Yotes went to the playoffs, the Suns allowed him to do a TV commercial for Sanderson Ford. And I got to do it. Was just him and I in the commercial. Talk about your legs shaking.
That's cool. Yeah.
But he was, again, gracious and kind. And I just look back and I thought, there's someone that I would aspire to be that kind of a human being. As humble as he was for the accolades that he had in this town, he was just such a great man.
Yeah. No, and then I love that he did those commercials and stuff. I'm still getting over Gambo at shortstop, by the way. But
it was hilarious. It was great. It was hilarious.
Just kidding, Gambo. But yeah, I mean, and I think that's what's interesting. You and I, we watched this man and I think we never thought we were going to lose him, but that's how life goes. But I think the fact that he inspired you and I to be like, wow, I want to be like that. Someone that's just kind and gracious. Like, yeah, he's busy. Yeah, he's got a lot going on. Yeah, everybody wants him to be in their commercial or on their, doing whatever.
Yeah.
And he's, the life of a broadcaster. I don't think no one thinks it's tough, but like really,
the travel schedule,
the travel, being a team broadcaster, the grind, even just keeping your voice healthy. I mean, this sounds ridiculous and silly, but these are the things people take for granted.
Well, when people think you show up at a game. From his, what he did, you just show up, turn the microphone on, and broadcast the game.
Yeah, and you and I know it's prep before. That's even now in my world. Now I'm doing some play-by-play. I'm doing some color. I did some ASU baseball and softball, even women's hoops, and I do high school football for fun. And I always say it's a duty to not only anyone watching, but even those players, their families. Like, you might say, who's listening? If you talk about a high school game, it's almost harder when the families are watching.
Right.
Because you want to get the stories, or you want to tell the stories of the kids and tell the stories of the parents, and you don't want to miss anything.
And as silly as it sounds to anybody that may be watching, this sounds silly, but how much time you spend, if it's new, getting the names right.
Oh, yeah.
Making sure you pronounce the name.
You don't want to screw up a name.
Right. And especially, you got a kid that's going to be on TV for probably the only time in his life, playing a high school football game. Yeah. It would be easy for you to just, I hope I'm getting that right, and do the best you can.
I always tell my students, do not guess. That's not the right way to do it. Find out. And if you have to go and ask somebody in the family or whatever, go and ask the person. Sometimes that's hard to do. But there's a lot of prep involved. So even for the, when you look at the NBA, things, it is the same teams. Well, who's out? Who's injured? What happened to this person? And then all bringing it in his own way that was only, uniquely Al McCoy. Only the way he could do it. So
he was incredible. 2 more questions, and I'll get you out of here. First one is about social media. Do you love it? Do you hate it? Is it a love-hate relationship? What is it?
It's a love-hate. I mean, I handle it. I feel like my job is not to post stuff on social media. It's like gravy. It's kind of like extra stuff. No one says to me, Jody, you must do this. So I choose to put out things, But what I hate is, and, again, we could talk for hours on this, is just the accountability factor of who's putting stuff out there. Mm-hmm. It used to be that it was very, and who is and everyone talks about who is a journalist. Well, yeah, it used to be, of course, when you and I started in this business, you weren't hired. You wouldn't work for a legitimate outlet if you didn't have credentials, if you didn't have a level of, honesty and we all believed in that, and it worked for the most part. I mean, there's always going to be an outlier of someone that writes something, whether they got it wrong maliciously or not. And now it's just, there's so much, we don't know you don't even know if these accounts are real half the time, or someone takes something. Probably the most damaging thing is someone takes something and they just repost it without verifying its truth. Right. So that I hate about it. I think we all do. I would hope most people do. But for sports, that's the thing, is that it's very, it's great for sports fans. It's great for me. It's great for news. Players put out news. Players put out things. It gets, on the positive side for a team like the D-backs, is like you get to see, even like TikTok, which I'm not really super active on, but TikTok, Instagram, they get to see how the players interact, and a lot of fun stuff. I choose to kind of use it more for fun, but I do use it for news, and it's something that's a real tool, as you know.
Are there restrictions on you of what you can and can't do? Like during a game, are you allowed to post and do things during the game on your social media? Or because you're working a game, it's for the network and you have to make sure that whatever information you're doing is theirs?
No, I think I can pretty much do what I want. I've got, I'll take videos, people that follow me will see, if a guy hits a homer, like Suarez Suarez on a hot streak, hey, he's hitting homers like crazy. It's a lot of fun. He comes in, the high fives, the celebrations, things like that. So yeah, it's fine. I don't think there are any, I don't think there are any rules like that against in the game, and then anything we do on the network, of course, usually if it can get clipped by the network and put out there.
So, last question is World Series, Super Bowl, but are there aspirations? Are there things that you want to do that you haven't done yet in your career, or do you just want to do more of the things you've done?
That's a great question, and I do get that a lot. And people will say, "Well, what else?" I love what I'm doing now. Things have changed a lot since I'm more of a freelancer now, right? Like I have jobs and I have requirements for those jobs, primarily my job with MLB local media, but I get to do, other things in the off season, and I'm enjoying that side of it. So what that is, I don't really know. It's just doing more, whether it's, some play-by-play opportunities. I still just love reporting and storytelling. I'm looking at bringing back a show that I had that was fairly popular on the previous network, Driven In, and trying to bring that in because that's fun to me. Yeah. That's the kind of stuff that, I mean, I enjoy all of it, but when you can entertain people too, I mean, I love the nitty gritty of the daily games and the coverage of the games and asking a guy, you know, what pitch did he see on that homer or what did it, but so maybe some more creative stuff too, but continuing to expand that way. I just think it's been interesting having more things open up and more opportunities, but there isn't one thing like, oh my, I need to do this before my career's over or I'm not going to feel fulfilled, because I really feel fulfilled every day. Every day that I go out there and do what I consider to be a good job. Yeah. And oh, by the way, every day that you do this I always tell the students, it's an opportunity to be great, or you could screw it up. Like, you know, even if you've been doing this 25 years, you still bring your A game every day, because if you don't, you know, you might get bitten there. But so I just love it, and I'm just going to continue kind of doing what I've been doing.
It's interesting because I never thought I'd love something as much as I love radio, and I love this radio business.
You're pretty good at it.
I love it. It's so much fun, and I get to do a TV show. But this podcast that we're doing, these Amazing Arizonans, we came up with a concept. We started doing them in June of 23, hoping that we would get great stories. I never imagined I would love this as much as I do. This story, being able to learn from you, learn about you, the names, the Colangelos, but just hearing Arizona stories. We interviewed recently Kim Alexis, the supermodel from the 80s, and to hear behind the scenes stories, you know, to be able to have a platform where you can tell a story about who you are. I love learning about people, and having a platform to do that and then share it with people. I love it more than I imagined I would.
Yeah, it's awesome because you love talking to people.
I do.
And in many ways, I feel the same, and you love interviewing people. And look at the way you're shooting questions at me with, you know, you just have it all in your brain. And that's kind of how I work too. Like you can sometimes when I have a piece of paper, I don't even look at it anyway. It's like, why do I even have that? So, and I listened to a little bit of the Kim Alexis podcast, which was so interesting to me because I was one of those young girls that, like, she was the supermodel, I think around the same time as Kathy Ireland and all that girl. I mean, just beautiful women, right? And I learned, and I love that she's got such values too, that like in the industry wanted to push her a certain way and she was not going to go that way. Yeah. And I think that's so important. So I love that, you know, now I have to watch the rest of them, right?
Are you gonna do one? You gonna do a podcast?
I mean,
with the Rolodex you have of people.
I've toyed with the idea. I've had a couple people. I've had two people in particular tell me, and one is the person that I don't even know that well, and they were like really adamant, like Jody, when the Fox Valley network went away, and I became more of like, you know, my own, you know, kind of this is my own business, right? It's my career, but and they were like, you really need to do one, and so I've kind of been toying with some ideas with different things, and I'm maybe.
I just, the reason why I say that is because you're such a good storyteller. The format of not having to be beholden to a clock.
Yeah. No, it's nice. This is great because it's very free flowing.
Right, exactly.
We can just
it's a conversation.
Yeah, I do.
Well, I really appreciate the time.
This was so much fun.
It is a lot of fun. The reason why we do these podcasts, and I want you to check them all out if you get an opportunity, Amazing Arizonans, is to tell stories from the Grand Canyon State. We both have been here almost the same amount of time. I've been here 30 years. You've been here 25. Mm-hmm. Similar backgrounds in where we grew up. But we kind of made it in a town we love.
That's right.
That's cool.
It's so cool. It's so much fun.
Thank you for spending the time. I know you're busy, especially during baseball season. But thanks for carving out the time.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it.
All right.
Thanks for watching Amazing Arizonans, presented by Resolution Copper. Tap the button in the middle to subscribe to KTAR News.